So it's already 2 minutes past 10, and we can start because we have really a huge program for this very nice Saturday day. Even in Moscow, Felix, today it's the same. It's just for you especially because it's very, very rare now in here that we can see the sun even in spring this time, but it's sunny today and it's really warm in the street. I was going out
better now.
Not wearing anything, and it was just okay, just immediately. So, guys, we are starting our 7th workshop. It's annual workshop. We want it to be a regular, permanent event within the April conference. And today we will have many presentations of our PhD students and some PhD students from different universities. And we have our colleague, our good friend from Spain, Feliz Eturiaga, who is going to be a keynote presenter for today. And I would like him to introduce himself and to say a few words about his work, about Spain, about his friendship with Russians, about his participation in some activities of our university for some years. Please, Felix. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you for your kind invitation. I was trying to share my screen. I'm not sure.
Alexandra, maybe you can help and explain what he should do. Is Alexandra with us?
Alexandra Егорова.
Can you hear me?
Да, я слушаю.
Can you share your screen now?
Еще раз, скажите громче. Да,
You can try to share a screen. Can you share a screen now?
Саша, ты на связи, там поможешь?
Может быть, надо, чтобы он выслал презентацию, и Саша будет тогда, как организатор, открывать ее.
Саша, сделай звук, чтобы было слышно.
Алло, меня слышно?
Вот, Ирина Васильевна.
Да, я сделала ему разрешение экрана, но сейчас он отключен от презентации. Вот сейчас снова.
Felix, please try again.
Now you can share your screen.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it.
morning. I'm
Теперь
I-
видно.
my connection. Okay.
Yeah, we now see the screen, but can you say louder because it's not very good, the voice, I mean.
Okay, I
Yeah.
will speak louder.
Okay, that's
First of all, I would like to thank Irina for her kind invitation to take part in this workshop. Also, I thank you, all of you, for attending this seminar and giving me the opportunity to share with you some of my reflections about the research in finance and in business. So my name is Felix Lopez. I'm a professor of finance at the University of Valladolid in Spain, but I am also affiliated with HCC. More specifically, I am a member of the International Laboratory of Intangible-Driven Economics, whose head is Ángel Barajas and Elena Shakina. And I met Irina, I don't know, perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. Irina, I don't remember exactly, in one of the April conferences in Moscow. So from that and after, we have got in touch, and now I am pleased to share with you my ideas about the research in corporate governance. So let me give you what is happening on my computer. What about this session? The aim of the objective of this session is triple, or we have 3 objectives, depending on your personal situation. For some of you who are away from corporate governance, I would like to provide you with an approach to a scientific field to make you know how is the research on corporate governance. For some of you who don't work actually on corporate governance, but you would like to work on it, I hope to provide you with some topics, some ideas that can be helpful for you in order to work on corporate governance. And for the people who are actually working on corporate governance, my objective is to provide you with some examples of how somebody is working on these issues. And my presentation will cover, or is divided into 3 points. First of all, how the research on corporate governance is so fashionable, the topicality of corporate governance. Then we'll review the theoretical foundations of corporate governance. Finally, I will give you 2 or perhaps 1, depending on how much time we will have, a couple of personal examples of personal papers written with people from HCC too. So I will give you some examples. Let me begin with the topicality of corporate governance. Why corporate governance is nowadays so fashionable? And I will speak about facts, what is happening, and later I will give you some of my ideas, the reasons to explain this topicality of corporate governance, of the research on corporate governance. Let me begin with the facts. Here you can see the number of entries in Google Scholar when you type corporate governance. I did this research a couple of weeks ago, and I found more than 1 million entries in Google Scholar. So papers, academic work related to corporate governance. And what is important, so we are speaking about more than 1 million papers or documents about corporate governance, but what it's also important is that when you add some other keywords, for instance, management, law, finance, and accounting, when you add these words, you also find a lot of documents. For instance, the combination between corporate governance and management gives us around 1,060,000 entries, or corporate governance law, and so on. So the first idea I would like to stress is that corporate governance is a kind of multifaceted field. So it can be studied from a management point of view, from a financial point of view, from an accounting point of view, and so on. So we are speaking about a wide field of research, a wide field of study. And in this slide, you can see the number of papers published on corporate governance in the Web of Science covered journals. So you know that there are two big databases about papers and publications, the JCR, Journal of Citations Report, Web of Science, whatever you want to say, and there is another database which is Scopus. So in this Web of Science journals, that maybe in this field we have, I don't know, around 200 journals, more or less. Here we have the number of papers published on corporate governance. For instance, 10 years ago, we had, 10 years ago, we have around 900 papers. Nowadays, it's more than double. So we are speaking about 2,400 papers published last year on corporate governance. And for sure, there is an increasing trend. The number of papers is increasing, so corporate governance is more and more fashionable, is more and more important in the academic community. There is another database on papers, which is Scopus. Here you have a similar evolution. The number of papers published in Scopus covered journals in the latest 15 years, papers who focus on corporate governance. You can see that some years ago, for instance, in 2006, there were around 700 or 800 papers published on corporate governance. And in latest years, in 2020, we had around a bit more than 2,200 more or less. So there is a clear upwards trend. So corporate governance as a scientific field is more and more important. And to give you an idea of how important or what's this evolution, here in this other slide, we can compare the number of papers on corporate governance, which is the blue column, with the number of papers written by people from HEC. So all the professors affiliated with HEC in Scopus covered journals. You can see, first of all, I would like to congratulate you, because you can see that this yellow column is higher and higher. So it means that researchers, professors from HEC published more and more papers in Scopus journals. And in fact, you can see that in latest years, for instance, in 2020 or 2019, the yellow column is higher than the blue column. It means that there are more papers from HEC professors than papers on corporate governance. But taking together all these papers, we can see a comparison. It means that from 2006 to 2020, there have been around 26,000 papers on corporate governance. And the scientific production of HEC as a whole university is a bit lower than 20,000. It's 19,217. So it means that the production, the scientific production on corporate governance is even more important than a whole university like HEC. So it means that as if we had a whole university focused on corporate governance. So this is a fact that can explain or that shows how important and how fashionable the research on corporate governance is nowadays. Another view of this fact is having a look at the main journals on corporate governance. Here I have brought 3 journals: Corporate Governance, International Review. Perhaps this is the most prestigious and the most important one. It has been, or it's published by Willie Blackwell. But there are some other journals, for instance, Corporate Governance, published by Bingley, and Developments in Corporate Governance and Responsibility, whose publisher is Emerald. What about the first one? For instance, Corporate Governance and International Review. It's a journal which is included in Web of Science. And here you can see the impact factor. So you know that the impact factor is an indicator, is a number that informs you or informs us about how important, how influential is a journal. How many times the papers that are published in the journal are cited by other papers, by other journals. So you can see that there are ups and downs. Some years it's higher, some years lower, but in general, broadly speaking, there's an increasing trend. So the impact factor of this journal is higher and higher, and even the position in the ranking is more and more important. It's more or less included in the first quartile, more or less, of some of the fields. Here you have the other journal, Corporate Governance, which is published by Emerald. So it's a journal which is included in Scopus in 3 categories: in business management and accounting, in strategy and management, and in management of technology and innovation. In the downwards figure, you can see the impact factor between 1999 and nowadays. You can see that it has increased from around 0.5 or 0.6, and nowadays it's in 1.4, which means that this journal has also more and more scientific recognition. In fact, it used to be in the 3rd quartile some years ago. Later, it went up to the 2nd quartile in most of the fields, and now it's in the 1st quartile in Scopus. So it means that we have here another important journal, journal who is influential in the field of corporate governance. So these are basically the 2 facts that I wanted to stress as a proof of the emergence and the importance of corporate governance as a scientific field. What about the reasons? And these are some of my ideas. Perhaps you may agree or you may disagree, because it's just my personal view of this field. So as economists, we are used to think of demand and supply. So to explain the importance of corporate governance, I will also speak about demand side factors and supply side factors. So when people, institutions, politicians are asking for better corporate governance, and how we, the people who work at the university, professors, researchers, and so on, we can provide them with better explanation for corporate governance. Concerning the demand or the demand side factors, my personal view is that there are 4 factors that can explain how everybody, or in a number of countries and so on, institutions are requiring better corporate governance. First of all, the growing importance of capital markets. Secondly, the liberalization all over the world. Third, the globalization. And finally, some political concerns, some political factors that could be influential. And concerning the supply side factors, I would say that nowadays we have better theoretical models. We know better we understand better the company, the relationship between the people inside the company, and now we have also better data, and there is a kind of pressure among academics to publish. The idea of publish or perish, so we work on corporate governance. Let me give you some examples of each one of these factors. Concerning the first one, we have spoken about how capital markets are more and more important. Here you have the number of listed firms all over the world between 1990 and 2020. So it's more or less, it has doubled more or less in the latest 30 years. So some years ago, all over the world, there were around 25,000 listed firms, and now there are slightly more than 50,000. So it means that capital markets are more and more important. There are more and more listed firms, and these firms suffer from problems inside the company. The relationship between shareholders and managers, even the relationship among different kinds of shareholders, the information that companies provide to the analyst, and so on. So this growing number of companies means that we have to pay more attention to the governance of the company. And this is one of the reasons that could explain why corporate governance is drawing more and more attention. Secondly, the liberalization. So there is a process all over the world, a process of deregulation in which laws are not so constraining, and so it means that the agents inside the companies, managers, directors, shareholders, have more and more freedom. They have more possibilities to work, or even also to take advantage of their own personal situation. Here, for instance, you have the index of economic freedom from Russia, and I have taken this index from the Heritage Foundation. It's an American think tank. But at the beginning of this century in Russia, this index of economic freedom was 50, and now this index is 60. So it has increased, and the same has happened in a number of countries. And you can see there are some ups and downs, but there is an increasing trend in the index of economic freedom. It's a combination, a composite index of financial freedom, commercial freedom, tax freedom, monetary freedom, and so on. Well, in any case, what I wanted to stress is that there are more and more economic freedom in a number of countries, and it means that the economic agents have more possibilities for looking for their own interest, and this means that we need better and more corporate governance. Finally, another factor is that the political concerns. In the latest years, perhaps the PhD students, you are very young. Perhaps you don't know some of these companies of scandals. But the people who are, or we are a bit older. For instance, for us, the Lehman Brothers scandal is very famous. The Enron scandal, Enron case is very famous. Parmalat case and so on. So in the latest years, there have been some cases of bad corporate governance with terrible consequences for the country, for society, and so on. For instance, the failure of Lehman Brothers is one of the reasons of the recent financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and so on. Or perhaps the problem with the information of Volkswagen some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So there have been big companies involved in bad practices in corporate governance scandals, and this has raised the concern of political, yes, of politicians. So we now pay more and more attention to these issues. And secondly, in addition to these demand side factors, we also could speak about the supply side factors. So better corporate governance is needed, and what can we say? What can we give to this area? So we as professors, as researchers, as PhD students, we can contribute to better knowledge, a better understanding of this issue. First of all, because we have better theoretical models. Basically, the agency theory, which stress the conflicts between the agents, between the people who are inside the company, and so on. There are two influential papers, one in 1976 and the other is from 1983, from Michael Jensen, William Macklin, Eugene Fama. So they have given us a wide comprehension of the problems inside the company and how we can work to align the interest of different types of investors. Secondly, we have more and more data about corporate governance. Perhaps the people who are older, for instance, some of us remember when we had very few data about corporate governance, how work we had to, yes, how hard we had to work to have some information and so on. Now, while I was reviewing your proposals for this seminar, I realized that some of this information is available. Some years ago, it wasn't so available as nowadays. So now we have more data, so we can work on corporate governance. And finally, the latest factors is I would say the academic pressure. So professors, PhD students, and so we are required to publish papers. University gives us the incentives to publish papers, or the universities and require us to publish papers. So we have more data, we have a better knowledge of what's happening in the company, we have the incentive to work on corporate governance. So the final consequence of all of this is that corporate governance as a field is having more and more importance. So this would be the end of this first part of the talk, of the speech about the topicality of corporate governance. And now let me review which are the foundations, the theoretical foundations of corporate governance. So if we had to define corporate governance, there is not a single universally accepted definition of corporate governance. Here I have brought three different definitions with advantages and disadvantages. The first one is the most simple one. It's the first one, provided by the Kedwick Committee in the United Kingdom almost 30 years ago. So the system by which companies are directed and controlled. So the underlying words are mine. So as you can see, it's a very simple definition, but it's too vague. So the system by which companies are directed and controlled. What does it mean? It means people, it means procedures, it means mechanisms. We don't exactly. So now we have two different additional definitions that stresses different parts of the company. For instance, the first one is provided by the Toronto Stock Exchange. I want to stress this fact. So it's a Canadian approach. It's a kind of Anglo-Saxon approach to this question, and it's the process and the structure to manage the firm in order to create value for shareholders, which includes ensuring the firm's financial viability. So, as you can see, yeah, the only group of people who is referred to is the shareholders. So, according to this approach, the most important in a company is shareholders, and even there seems not to be any other group of people. And now we have also another definition which has been issued by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So it's an international organization with, I think that there are around 35 countries. So it's this definition has a wider scope. And the definition is a set of relationships between a company's management, its board, its shareholders, and other stakeholders to provide a structure and so on. Okay, so here we can see that there is a specific reference to different groups of people. They're speaking about the managers, they're speaking about the directors in the board of directors, of course the shareholders, but they also speak about other stakeholders. So these stakeholders may be the customers of the company, the suppliers, the employees, even the whole society is a stakeholder of the company. So we have kind of two different approaches, a very specific approach, the Anglo-Saxon one, and a wider approach, this international approach in which some other stakeholders are taken into account. For a graphical presentation of this problem of corporate governance, you can see that in most of the companies, there is a separation between the owners and the controllers of the company. On the one hand, we have the shareholders who own the company, who are the owners of the company, but these shareholders, sometimes they don't have the ability, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the knowledge to run the company, to control the company. So they delegate in the managers, and they give to the managers the control of the company. So they delegate, and they are supposed, shareholders are supposed to monitor the managers. But this theoretical, this initial view is not exactly the one which happens in reality. Because in reality, there is not a single body of shareholders, but in most of the listed companies, most of the companies quoted in capital markets, there is a plethora of small shareholders, of minority shareholders. And these shareholders, they delegate to the managers, so they are the owners of the company, but actually they don't monitor the company. They don't spend time, or they don't spend resources in monitoring the managers. Let's think of big companies, or Russian companies, for instance, Gazprom, Lukoil, and so on. So when we have these minority shareholders, if you were owners of some hundreds of some thousands of rubles in these big companies, you don't have the incentive to spend time, or even you don't have the knowledge to monitor the managers. So in this case, shareholders usually hire a group of professional or specialized people, the directors, and these directors are supposed to monitor managers on behalf of these minority shareholders. So shareholders delegate on directors, and directors, they have the ability and the power to monitor managers. And this would be one of the dimensions of corporate governance. But actually, this is not the only problem in the companies, because in the companies, in addition to this group of minority shareholders, there are also large shareholders. For the Russian market is an example, but it happens in a number of countries. in Italy, in Germany, in Spain, and so on. So in the companies, there are small shareholders, minority shareholders, but there are also sometimes a big, large shareholder, and shareholder who actually has the incentives to monitor the managers. So this large shareholder, if you had a 10% of Lukoil, or if you had a 15% of Gazprom, for sure you would monitor, you will supervise the managers, the company. So these large shareholders actually delegate, but actually monitor managers. So it means that we have two kinds of relationships, two kinds of problems. One, a vertical problem between minority shareholders and managers. This is a kind of vertical problem. But we also have a horizontal problem, the relationship between these large shareholders and these minority shareholders, because the incentives, the information of each group are different, and perhaps each group of shareholders are pursuing different interests. So it means, or it makes sense, the definition that we have spoken about previously. Corporate governance, a set of relationships between a company's management, here we have the managers, the boards of directors, the shareholders, and the shareholders can be small or large shareholders, and even other stakeholders, to provide the structure to which objectives of the company are set, and the means of attaining those objectives and monitoring performance are determined. Okay. But in addition to this situation, this would be the company, but in addition to the company, or each company works in a different environment. The problem that faces a Russian company is not the same that the problem faced by a German or American company. So in addition to this internal situation of the company, we have to take into account I would say, the environment in which the company works. It means the legal tradition, how capital markets are developed in each country, the information, the accounting information, even the national culture, the acceptation of the power, the long-term versus short-term orientation of the people in the country, and so on. So there are a number of external factors, external issues which are outside of the company and can have an influence on the corporate governance. So the combination of this view of the company, these relationships inside the company, and this external environment of the company gives us the mechanism of corporate governance. And more specifically, we could speak about two different groups of mechanisms, the internal ones and the external mechanisms. The internal ones come from inside the company, and the external mechanisms are related to the environment of the company. Some examples of these mechanisms are, for instance, among the internal mechanisms, we could speak about the capital structure. The capital structure is a financial decision, but it's also a mechanism to rule the company, or the dividend policy, the board of directors. I'm going to focus on the board of directors. The ownership structure, I mean the relationship among shareholders, the internal auditing process, the compensation of the managers, how the compensation schemes are defined, and so on. And among the external mechanisms, we could speak about the external analyst of the company, how they follow the company, the external auditing process, and even the rules. In some of them, the rules, the laws, the market for corporate control, how it works, and so on. So I am going to focus on two mechanisms. There are a number of mechanisms. We could speak about all of these, but I'm going to focus on two of them. On the internal side of the company, I will speak about the board of directors. And among the external factors, I would speak about the markets and the legal protection of the companies. And let me begin to give you an example of this. Let me begin with a comparison between, for instance, Russia and Canada. In terms of GDP, both countries are quite similar. So the GDP, the Russian GDP in thousands of billions of US dollars is 1.58, and the GDP of Canada was 1.65. So it means that the economic importance of these countries would be more or less the same. But these countries have the same financial structure. So here you can see how capital markets are very different in Russia and in Canada. And again, I begin that they are countries that supposedly should be more or less similar. But let me show you. First of all, here the number of mergers in the markets. And these data have been taken from the Institute of Mergers, Acquisitions and Alliances, an international organization that provides a lot of financial information. So we can see that in terms of number of mergers, Canadian markets are slightly more active than Russian markets. Perhaps the only exception could be in 2010, but in most of the years, 2007, 8, 2012, 13, 14, even until 2018, the number of mergers in the Canadian markets is higher than the number of mergers in Russia. But not only the number of mergers, but also, and what is more important, the value of these mergers. So data are in, I would say, in billions of US dollars, and we can see that in Russia, the latest years, the average value is around 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, and in Canada we have 4, 5, 6 times higher. No? We have 150,000, even 200,000, and so on. So what it means is that capital markets in Canada are much more active than capital markets in Russia. And what it means is that this problem of corporate governance in Canada is different to the problem of corporate governance in Russia. So in Canada, we have some external mechanisms. We have the market for corporate governance, which is much more active. It means that in Canada, problems of corporate governance can be solved in a way which is different to Russia. In Russia, the external mechanisms are not very active, are not very important. So it means that in a country like Russia, the internal mechanisms are supposed to be more active. In a country like Canada, these external mechanisms are much more important. Going on with this idea of the importance of external governance, let me speak to you about the relevance of the legal protection, which is it's called the law and finance approach. Here you have 4 papers whose authors, it's an international team. Rafael Laporta, he's from Argentina. Florencio López de Silanes, he's a Mexican co-author. It's a Mexican author, sorry. I have a paper written with Florencio López de Silanes, it's true. And Dries Leifer, he's a Russian but works in Harvard University. And Robert Vishny, he's an Indian and works, I think, in Chicago. Okay, the common characteristic of all of this is that they work or they have worked in the United States. Let's have a look at these 4 papers. The first one is about legal determinants of external finance. How finance is determined by legal factors. Let me see. 12,000 citations. Law and Finance. This is very influential paper. 22,000 citations. Corporate ownership around the world, or investor protection and corporate governance. They have more than 10,000 citations and so on. So they have introduced a new approach, which is called the law and finance. The basic idea is that finance is heavily affected by laws. So the legal factors, the legal environment is very influential on the financial, on the economic activity, first of all. Second, there are only very few legal traditions, very few legal sources. So laws are not written from scratch, but they have some common sources, which are not very much, and which are not many sources. There are only some few legal traditions, and these laws then spread around the world through a different approaches, like borrowing, like imitation, or even imperialism. So, and what is important about these papers were written around the end of 20th century and the beginning of this century is that they have an international approach. The previous research only focused on very few countries, on United States, United Kingdom, Japan, 3 or 4 countries, no more. But this research has a very wide scope, and they have analyzed a number of countries. So according to the laws, according to the legal origin, there are 2 different branches, 2 different streams, the common law and the civil law. And even inside the civil law, we could speak about countries with a French origin, a German origin, or a Scandinavian origin. So here you have the distribution, and you can see the international approach of this research. Countries in yellow are the ones that most of them. Let's think about what is the common characteristics about these countries in yellow. Can you give me any idea what is common in all of these countries? We have here Canada, United States, Australia, India, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, United Kingdom. Any clue? Could you give me idea about
excuse me. British Empire, or
okay.
In case of Australia, Canada, and so on, we have by now British, how to say, British Friendship or something like that, or British Union.
Okay. Very good. What's your name? Sorry.
Konstantin.
Konstantin. Very interesting idea that Konstantin has given us. So these are former British colonies. They speak English and so on. So the laws in India or the laws in Australia, in South Africa, are usually inspired in the laws of the United Kingdom and so on. And this is the common law countries. Then we have these countries in blue, which is the civil law, the French branch of the civil law. The French laws were, or Spain borrowed this French approach. Portugal also borrowed this French approach, and it was then extended to the Portuguese and Spanish colonies in South America or in Latin America. Then we have the German civil law, which was also inspired, or which inspired also the Japanese and Korean legal framework, and then the Scandinavian. Okay, so what's important in these countries? What is important, or there are 4 factors that are taken into account in this comparison. First of all, the rights of the shareholders. Secondly, the rights of the lenders, the creditors, the enforcement of the law, and the accounting. Let me give you some comparison. For instance, in terms of shareholders' rights, the rank goes from 0 to 0.5. you can see that the common law countries have the higher score in terms of shareholders' rights. It's higher than all the civil countries, the French, the German, and the Scandinavian countries. And concerning the creditor rights, also the common law countries score higher than their civil counterparts. In common law countries, then the score is 3.1, while in the civil law countries we have 1.6, 2.3, 2, and so on. In terms of enforcement, we have civil countries which are over the common law countries, the case of Scandinavian and the German countries, but we have also French.
Release, your microphone is now switched off.
Excuse me, can you switch on your microphone? It is the bottom or the up?
Perfect. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what has happened. Okay. And let me go on with the presentation. So the idea is that there are relevant differences among countries in terms of protection, and the common law countries are the most protected ones. And second, or for instance, we have some, since we in civil law countries we are not so protected, we have some mechanisms to substitute this law protection. And finally, or the other idea is that when we work on, when we do an international analysis, when we research, we work with international data, we should take into account this different international framework. For instance, here we have the ownership in 5 countries: France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, and the United States. And we have here the number of companies with dispersed ownership, the number of companies in which shareholders have a pyramidal control. It means that shareholders with few shares can have the control of the company. And here we have in the right-hand side column, which is on average the proportion of the largest shareholder. We can see that there are big differences between these civil law countries and the common law countries. For instance, the ownership is more concentrated in France, Germany, and Italy than in the United Kingdom and the United States. It means that here we have dispersed ownership. In these countries, we have more concentrated ownership, which is the outcome of the legal environment. If shareholders are not enough protected, if the protection of shareholders is not good, the reaction of shareholders is to have a big proportion of shares, to be influential in the company, because they don't enjoy this legal protection. Even more, they use these pyramidal control mechanisms in order to enhance, to increase the control of the company. And this doesn't happen in the United Kingdom and the United States, because here in the United Kingdom and the United States, shareholders are better protected. As a consequence, what's the average stake of the largest shareholder in France, Germany, and Italy? 20, 57, 55. So it's much higher than the United Kingdom and the United States. So what I wanted to stress is that since we have poor investor protection in some countries, shareholders have to react, have to introduce some substitute mechanisms. And just to end, let me give in 4 or 5 minutes let me give you an example of our research about board of directors. This is a paper that has been written with Marina Zavertieva. She's also affiliated to HCC in the International Laboratory for Intelligence-Driven Economy in Perm. What we study is the role of the directors. So previous literature has shown that boards have to play two different roles, to monitor and to provide resources. But previous literature has stressed this first part, the monitoring of the board. In Russia, the personal connections among managers, directors, and so on are important. So we posit that in Russia, the resources that directors bring to the board are almost so important as the monitoring of the company. So in this case, it's more important to know what's the knowledge, what's the abilities that directors have. And this is what we analyze with a social network analysis. Okay, let me go on. How many companies we study? We have studied a bit more than 100 companies for 5 years, from 2009 to 2014. So 600 from years of service. And what is more important, we analyze each director of the company. So we have a bit more than 6,000 directors from these sectors and so on. Okay, this is something that we can skip about. And we have here a number of firm level statistics, the leverage, the age of the company, size, valuation, price to book value, the owners, and so on. And then we go to the director level statistics, and we have calculated the age of each director. The average is around 48. It's consistent with some of the figures that we have provided in your abstracts for the students. The number of degrees, the proportion of women, and so on. And we also analyze whether these directors have international experience, they have worked in the same industry, they have worked as a CEO, and they are former politicians. They have experience in the government. We can see that boards in Russia have more and more international experience, which is good for the business, and they have less political connections. The proportion of directors with government experience, with former political background, is decreasing. So, and then we run a social network analysis. Just a couple of ideas about what's social network. Here, let's suppose that we have company 1, 2, and 3. In company 1, we have 3 directors, A, B, and C. In company 2, we have 3 directors too, which are we have 4, B, C, D, and E. And in company 3, we have 3 directors, E, F, G. So actually, the relationship between directors is this one. So director E belongs to company 3 and company 2. So it can be used to put in contact these directors with these ones. So this is the idea of network of directors. We have a number of metrics here that I am going to skip about that. And what we can see is that the metrics of centrality are going down. So the network of directors in Russia is more and more decentralized. So the corporate governance is not so concentrated in a small number of directors. In fact, we have compared the companies which are the most connected companies with the other companies. And when we do this comparison, we can see that the most connected companies are larger, but have lower valuation. It's bad for the company to be so connected. And there are the companies with more ownership in the hands of the government. Their directors have less international experience and are basically politicians or have more political background. Okay, we are out of time, so I had a lot of ideas, but I'm going to skip about that. What are the conclusions of this paper? Good. We have seen that in Russia there has been a positive trend in the corporate governance. So directors in Russia have more international experience, are more independent, are less politically connected, and so on. So then we have seen that the most connected firms have a specific profile. They have lower valuations, larger, more connected to the government, and so on. And we have done the same analysis for the banks, for the independent directors, for the financial institutions, and so on. But I'm going not to present it because we are running out of time. So just to finish, at the beginning of my talk, I spoke that I had 3 aims, depending on your personal situation. For the ones who are far away from corporate governance, it's just a flavor, a view about what is corporate governance about. The people who would like to work on corporate governance, I hope to have provided you with topics, ideas for the work, and the ones who are working on corporate governance, some examples that support your decision to work on corporate governance. If you're interested in reviews, here there are 4 special issues of the journals, which are reviews. For instance, it's taking stock of corporate governance research, this new perspective on board research, the state of corporate governance research, and a review of corporate governance. Each one of these issues could be very helpful for you. Let me begin as I begin. Thank you, Irina, for your kind invitation. Thank you, all of you, all the attendees, all the PhD students, for the patience or for the attention you have provided to me. And if you are interested in this presentation and so on, I would be delighted to share it with you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Felix, very much. And I guess there are some questions. If we have some questions, it's time just to raise your hand and ask some questions, please. And I also would like to ask you, Felix, because there would be the next session related to corporate governance, as you see from the program. Just also to become a discussant, just spontaneous discussant here, listening the presentations and making some comments and the questions, please. So do we have questions?
I would be delighted.
Okay. The questions may even arrive a little bit. Oh, Alexander Markovich has a question. Okay. Go ahead, Alexander Markovich. Your microphone, please.
Oh, yes. Felix, thanks for your very interesting presentation and some topics. My question is, do you compare results connected with corporate governments in Russia and abroad, for example, Spain or European Union? Is first, and second, the same question connected with CEO.
What do you mean about the second question? Can you specify, Alexander Markovich?
The question is some specific in CEO in Russia and abroad?
Okay, Alexander, thank you very much for your interest and your questions. So I would say that in terms of international comparison, the Russian system is close to the other European countries because it relies much on the internal side of the company. So the control, the corporate governance is based on internal mechanisms of board directors, large shareholders, and so on, and not on the external mechanisms like the markets of corporate control and so on, which is more typical from the Anglo-Saxon countries. So the comparison would be that Russia has more in common with Germany, with Italy, with France, with Spain, than with other Anglo-Saxon countries. And concerning the characteristics of the CEOs in Russia, I had some. Let me show you. Okay. No, I have run an analysis about the. Okay, just a moment to show you the data we had. This is another paper with Marina Tsaretieva too, in which we analyze the main characteristics of the Russian CEOs, and we know that if they are a former political background, if they have served in politics and how long, if they have military experience, or if they report have military experience, and also the city of graduation, because the city of graduation gives us a kind of relationship, especially in countries like Russia, in which St. Petersburg and Moscow are two important cities. I'm studying in Russia, I'm sorry, studying in Moscow or studying in St. Petersburg, give a person some good relationships. So with all of these, we have done a kind of analysis, of descriptive analysis of the characteristics of the CEO, but I had run out of time and I haven't presented these characteristics of the shareholder, of the CEOs.
Sense.
Thank you very much. And I also, Felix, have a question. When you were talking about the theoretical background of corporate governance studies, you, of course, was focused on agency concepts. But what do you think about so-called stakeholder theory? It's growing in its importance, especially for last years. Stakeholder value creation, stakeholder focused company, sustainability goals of United Nations, they are all interrelated. So how do you think whether we should still stay on this agency theory argument, classical argument? Many people who are writing these articles are still doing this. They are saying the essence of governance is the conflict of interest between agents and principals, or it's updated.
Okay, it's very good question, Irina, because from my point of view, the agency theory is just a part of the whole picture. In the agency theory, the stress is on the conflicts among participants in the company, but the relationships among people are not only based on conflicts, there are also cooperation, there are some common interest and so on. So we should expand these theoretical foundations with some other views. For instance, like the stewardship theory, it can provide us with some ideas, because it's based on the idea that people try to work to cooperate with other people and so on. Or even the resource dependence theory. It means that each one of us provide the company with some specific resources which are valuable and so on. So the agency theory is just a part. It's quite based on the Anglo-Saxon approach, Anglo-Saxon mindset. But I think in other countries there are better theories.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we need now to go further to our first session, and there would be 4 presenters, I guess, from the program. And the next session is also focused on corporate governance, as you see from the program, and the relationship of corporate governance, board works, and sustainability and sustainable development of the companies. And according to the program, Evgenia Kiseleva should step in now and share her screen if possible. And just I ask everybody who is going to report on the PhD student side, just please keep your time, keep your eye on timing, because we have lots of presentations for today. please try to stick to 15 minutes, leaving some space for the comments of our discussants and of course for questions and answers. Thank you. Eugenia, are you with us?
Yep, good morning, everybody. I'm trying to upload the presentation. So, is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So, good morning once again to everybody. I'm very glad to here to the prof. Thank you for your presentation and for discovering the topic in a broad sense. And I will go further to with presenting one of my research on sustainable governance. And in particular, I will talk about the connection between sustainable governance and the financial results, and in particular in Russian market. So, why this topic? I chose this topic because it's very, very popular nowadays, and it is popular not only worldwide but also in Russia. And the hottest topic here is whether ESG issues are connected to financial results. So all the sustainability issues, sustainable governance, sustainable investments, is this financially efficient or not? And actually, despite the topic is very, very interesting and very popular, the empirical research is still very controversial, and it doesn't have the common answer to whether this connection exists or not, and is positive or negative. And also the topic is under investigated for developing markets outside of China, so for example, Russia. That's why we in Perugia University decided to analyze this connection between ESG and financial results in the worldwide sample and in Russia. So before going into detail, we decided to find which indicators out of ESG, out of all the sustainability issue, is the most connected to the market. So which indicators are most financially oriented. And we determined that actually G part or governance is the most market oriented. So the topic of today is the governance. And by governance in the context of sustainability, we mean the corporate governance system based on the integration of shareholders and other stakeholders' expectations. So Prof. Alex Lopez just told right now to us that the inclusion of stakeholders is appearing in the new terminology of governance, and we support it here in our research and we take it as a basis. And also sustainable governance, it safeguards society and the environment, not only the financial issues, but also the outside problems of the company. So if to take all the sustainability topics, why governance once again? So because governance, first of all, is the most comparable issue out of all sustainability issues. So it is more connected to the financial sphere. So if we want to integrate sustainability into the corporate governance agenda, into the financial sphere, we can start with the governance and then to use the E and S. And that's why we decided to look through the literature. So what are the explanations of the connection between sustainable governance and financial results? And first of all, of course, we also gathered the agency, institutional, and stakeholder theories that we just recently discussed. But we understood that Russian context is very particular and has its peculiarities, and we cannot just take the common theories and apply them to the Russian market. For example, we found the theory of McCarthy and Puffer, integrative social contract theory, that states that describes the peculiarities of the ethical norms in Russia. So we already discussed it again. So the insider, the close communication, the relationships are more important in Russia. And this theory describes it by the prevalence of trust between the people, by irrespect for private property and by the prevalence of personal favors. And this peculiarity is actually damaging the financial results, because person under such ethical norms tends to perform the results for its own benefit or for the benefit of its close related family members, friends, or co-workers, but not in the benefits of the whole company. So that's why the role of the governance or sustainable governance here is to align the local norms to the higher norm of law prevalence. And that's why we build the hypothesis about the positive relationship between sustainable governance and financial results. And if going to the second peculiarity of Russian market, it is the high state regulation and high centralization, and it is explained by CSR-based political legitimacy concept by Zhao of 2012. And in this condition of high regulation, companies tend to provide the check-off approach. So they don't build really some management system. They just try to align to the norms. They just put the ticks that, okay, we done it, we comply to the law, and that's it. And actually such approach is not beneficial. It doesn't bring any financial results, and it is proved in a lot of papers. So that's why we considered that such sustainable governance issues, like, for example, compliance, like anti-corruption or shareholder communication, board composition, they are all quite regulated, and thus they may tend not to bring so much financial results as non-regulated aspects. And out of non-regulated aspects, we found that strategy and risk management of sustainability, it is not regulated, of course, so it may bring the most positive results. So going from the hypotheses, you can see the graphical representation of them. Going from this to how we checked this hypothesis, so we took the sample of almost 200 Russian listed companies with listed shares on Moscow exchange. We took quite different companies from 24 different sectors, from of comparably different size, with different financial success, in order to control for these factors and in order to check whether sustainable governance indicator is really so universal for all companies as it is stated in the previous research. And for measuring the sustainable governance, our main variables, we built 4 variables. The first one was about sustainable governance itself, so the score for sustainable governance, and 3 others described the components of sustainable governance. The first one was strategic block, the second stakeholder communication block, and the third anti-corruption and compliance block and ethics. We built these indicators on the basis of the large literature review and of the World Economic Forum paper that was issued in 2020, and that is issued by consultancy agencies and investors, so it is quite tight related to the aims of our research. The data was taken from the sustainability and annual reports of the company, so it is an open source of the information. And evaluation was made manually, unfortunately, because this data on ESG and even on G governance is not very standardized, so it is difficult to measure it by some technical tools. So in detail, you can see the indicators that we used here, and I would like to highlight that there is only 9 indicators, so quite a little one amount, and it was made on purpose because one of the problems in ESG and sustainable governance research is that very few indicators play the role in the connection between governance and market value, and all the rest are just destroying the models and destroying the all the understanding of the connection. For the market value, we took the market to book value measure from the Olsen model of 1995. It is one of the most widespread model to describe the market value. Control variables are also from this model, and also we took the control of industry. So if to go to the results, first of all, we looked at sustainable governance scores of Russian sample and compared it to the international sample of our previous papers. And we found that actually the sustainable governance score in Russia is almost twice less than in the international sample. So we can say that Russian market has the potential for development, and is a great opportunity for the companies to go into this topic, to dig into the sustainable governance issue and to develop it, so it may bring real results comparing to their peers. Also, we mentioned that strategic component has the highest value, so it already tells us about the importance of the strategic block, but we can go further. And as far as our model deleted all the negative results of the companies just because of some technical statistical tools, we decided to compare the companies with negative financial results and positive financial results, just to compare the mean values of sustainable governance scores. And we found that companies with negative financial results, they have much less sustainable governance scores comparing to the companies with positive results. So we already see the trend in here, but of course we will check it later in the model. We also mentioned that sustainable governance scores are correlated to the size of the company, and actually it is explained by the peculiarity of Russian market again. So we have the centralized system in Russia, and everything is dependent on the size of the company. We have big state companies. They have the access to the main resources, so they can use these resources and improve their profitability. So it's quite explainable. But at the same time, all the sustainable governance indicators, they didn't cross the borderline of the 60 or 70% correlation. So we accepted it and we moved on to the next step. And again, strategic block here made the better performance than other blocks. So it had the least correlation, so it's least correlated with the size, so it brings the real value. And here on the slide, you can see the final models. And in a nutshell, they support both the hypotheses. So if we look at the first model, it describes that sustainable governance, the total sustainable governance score, really influences significantly the market valuations of the company. And this impact is positive. So we can guess that indeed sustainable governance is very important according to the integrated social contracts theory, and it aligns the local norms to the hyper norm of law prevalence, and by this it increases the market value of the company. If we look at models 2, 3, and 4 for each of the components of sustainable governance, we can see that all of them have the positive and significant influence, and even the coefficients are quite the same. But at the same time, we see that strategic block is slightly more significant comparing to other blocks. And here we can suggest that cultural peculiarities that are described by the CSR-based political legitimacy concept, they really work here, and they highlight the strategic block. And as you saw before in my descriptions, the strategic block was with the best results in each step of the research. So in this strategic block, it is not dependent on the government regulation. It is the component that can provide the opportunity for the company to be better than the peers, to present better, and to influence financial results. And if we compare the results of Russian market to the international market, we can see that here in this for models, we had the usual linear relationship, just direct without any peculiarities. However, in the international market, we had the piecewise regression where the market value increases in response to sustainable governance increase till some point. And after this point, the marginal return on each score of sustainable governance, it decreases. So we're going to consider that companies in international markets, some of them achieved the point of marginal return decrease, but Russian companies didn't reach it. And so for companies in Russia, it is much more valuable to develop the sustainable governance because it brings much more results than the international arena. So how does it influence these results? What does it bring to us, to our understanding? So of course, we found the connection between sustainable governance and market value and made this link clear. We compared between Russian and international market, and we also built the methodology that can be used by the rating agencies or investors and etc. So we try to answer the question that is raised by investors and companies and the consultancy agencies about how to measure this sustainable governance issue, how to make the link, how to integrate it into existing models of market value. Of course, there is a space for development. For example, I will just make an example of the one of the most important developments that I think is that we need to trace also such cases like Norilsk nickel oil spill, because when the spill appeared, actually it was a disaster, but none of the ESG ratings or sustainable governance ratings or even just governance ratings, they didn't track this difference. They didn't track this oil spill. And there is a big challenge, and we need to find how to track such sustainable governance indicators and to find their influence on financial value, on the corporate governance quality, and etc. And so in the end, I would like to tell about the scope of this research in general. I didn't say it in the beginning. I will tell it now. So this research was undertaken under the roof of the big project on the ESG value relevance. So we try to find the dependence between the ESG issues and financial results. And we undertook some of the research works already. And here it is on the list. You can see the main references from the other authors and from me as an author and my co-authors that we used in this research. And finally, this research we undertake in the University of Perugia with the cooperation with Russian consultancy agencies. So we have both the practitioners and scientific participants to consult with in both the worldwide arena and in Russian context. So thank you for your attention, and I think I can answer some questions.
Evgenia, thank you very much. It's really interesting paper. So guys, do we have questions and do we have comments, please? If we don't have immediate questions, even technical questions, then please, our discussants, you are really welcome to share your ideas. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. It was interesting. And I would like to ask you about variables. Where did you find the data, and what were your independent variable and dependent variables?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I moved through this part very quickly, so I can just go back. So about variables, the independent variables, the variables of my interest, they are on the 10th slide. We took them from the sustainability and annual reports of the companies. We downloaded these reports from the websites of the companies, and we analyzed it manually by 9 researchers separately, and then we made the cross-check of the issue of the scores, and by this we received them. Considering the dependent and control variables, we took them from Thomson Reuters database, and we built them on the basis of Olson model, as I told before. So you can see them on the 12th slide.
Thank you. And one more question: why don't you use G component of ESG rating, for example, to control the results?
We didn't take the outsider ratings because the ratings methodology is not very clear, so they don't print the details. And also other ESG ratings or governance ratings, they didn't fit in our aims. So we just decided to build our own rating, the scores, these ones, on the basis of our literature review and on the basis of World Economic Forum paper, in order to evaluate what we need for this research.
Okay, thank you for answers and questions. And now I would like to give the floor to our discussants, please.
Thank you.
May I give the question to all of participants?
Yeah, okay.
Please send your presentation to organize the committee of our conference.
Okay.
Okay, that's a proposal. I would say this is a requirement. It's not a question.
Yes.
Just the pressure over the participants. Okay. Felix, do you have some comments, please?
Yeah. I have some comments. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the presentation, for the effort, because it seems that I am the only non-Russian native speaker. So I appreciate the effort you are making to speak in English and to let me know or let me understand your research. Evgenia, I congratulate you because I think it's a nice research. In fact, you have some papers published from this research, so it's very positive. It's very positive. I have a couple of, from the theoretical point of view, I like your approach. You are doing a contribution, but I have some minor empirical questions. The first one is, okay, could you show us the MBView variable, the descriptive statistics of the market to book variable? Yes, the values. You have later the description, the maximum, the min. Yeah, okay. This is what I want. Let's have a look to this variable. It's your dependent variable. No? So I think that it's very dispersed. No? Let's compare the mean and the standard deviation between the minimum and the maximum. It's very dispersed. Perhaps, or have you thought of winsorizing the variable or excluding the outliers of the variable? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, actually, yes. The data set is very dispersed, as you said. Thank you for mentioning this. And it is actually always a problem when I take the Russian market for analysis, because even when I take the largest companies, anyway, the results of these companies are quite different. So I tried to get rid of outliers, and here I took only the positive financial results in order to not destroy my model. And I suggested that it will be enough because models are working and okay, because if I reduce more outliers, so the meaning of the model will be very reduced. So I decided to keep them. Okay,
yes, I understand there's a kind of trade-off between having a coherent sample and having a big number of observations. Okay, I understand. And I would also to ask you, why do you use the B-view inverted to control for the size of the company? Wouldn't it be more, I would say, intuitive just to take the log of total assets instead of
I took the control of the size. I controlled the size by the book value inverted because in some sense it already represents the size measure. And the point is that all other measures of the size are correlated with the book value inverted. So I decided to keep this one and not to take others. And I see that everything correlates quite highly with the size. So it's just the peculiarity of the market, and I kept it like this.
Okay, okay. And just my final comment is about your H2. I don't agree completely with your approach, because you said in your hypothesis that this strategy indicator should be, I would say, or the role should be more important or something like that. Okay. Actually, what you are testing there is that the significance level is different, but it's not, from my point of view, it's not related to the importance of the indicator. It's just how much we can accept that this coefficient is different from 0. Do you understand my point?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for mentioning this. Yeah, it's a really ambiguous point, and maybe I need to clarify the connections here better.
You are here speaking here about statistical significance, not about the influence or the importance.
Yeah, so the importance is quite the same for all the indicators. Yeah,
I agree with you. Yes. Okay, yes, that's my view, but I like, and I agree with you that you need to expand your data set. So to introduce another year and to work with panel data, or just with pool statistics, but with more years, more observation. Yeah, of course, for sure, it's important.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but good job and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
Yeah. We also have Anastasia Stepanova with us. She's associate professor from the School of Finance, and I invited her to become a spontaneous discussant here in that session. Anastasia, if you have also some suggestions, comments, questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, here. Thank you, Evgenia, for really interesting presentation with interesting ideas. So actually, it was, for me, it was the most interesting part, I believe, is your hypothesis number 2 about the strategic oriented component. Yeah, that seems to be, yeah, well, we can hypothesize that it can be more important in the area, in the environment, with the high role of the government. Yeah. So I believe that this is an interesting research question. As for the comments, so I would say that, well, you apply the ESG framework, yeah? And then I believe it could be really helpful to make such a metric. So ESG factors versus your X, Y, X2, X3 factors. Yeah, so how this ESG framework is reflected in your paper. Yeah. So for example, what does it mean? That's your factor X1. Yeah, so is it just about governance, or maybe that's also about social things? Yeah, so I'm talking about that. So how they are related, your view on the sustainable governance and ESG concept.
So yeah, I can answer now in a nutshell because I didn't put an attention to this here. So I will show the slide with the variables, with these factors here. So actually, each factor of sustainable governance is indeed connected to the ESG agenda. And we measure not just governance, but sustainable governance. So each metric is connected to the ESG. If we take, for example, strategy, then this strategy concerns the sustainability strategy. So we check whether company performs the sustainability strategy, whether it has the strategy over environmental, social issues, and some other issues. If it is a board composition, we look not only at duality, independent directors, and etc. We also look at stakeholder representation. For example, by the stakeholder board in the close to the board of directors. If we take anti-corruption, so it is already the ESG topic, so the social one or something like this. So we have here the training, the corrupted cases, the ethics norms. So it is again social issues. So all of them, yeah, they are tightly connected to the ESG.
Yeah, I'm talking exactly about that. Yeah, so yeah, so any questions you can face can be like that. Well, okay, so this the second measure you use, your X2 factor, that's just the pure governance, isn't it? So and things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and that was the first command, yeah, and the second command is about the importance of principles. Yeah, so how have you found these three factors? Was that the factor analysis? Was that the literature review only? So you've said that you've done you did that based on the WEF report, yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, here since you put all the analysis on the basics of these three factors, so the main question to the methodology is how you form these three factors.
So yeah, thank you for the question.
Five, not four, not two. That's important. Just three.
Yeah, we build them in accordance with the literature, and we use just three because according to our previous studies, we found that strategic approach, the inclusion of stakeholders, and the anti-corruption measures are the main three blocks that are responsible for the sustainable governance, and at the same time, they are most correlated to the market variations. So, for example, the strategic approach, we found it not only in the theoretical reviews, but also in the case studies. On the example of the company from the Eesti company from Italy, and they had the best, one of the best compliance systems in Italy, and they highlighted also the three blocks, and especially the strategic component and the communication with stakeholders. So from each of the papers of ours and of the literature review, we found that each of the papers supports these three blocks.
Okay, thank you very much, Evgenia and my colleagues who were discussing the paper, but the time is going. Unfortunately, we need to switch to the second presenter, and it's going to be, I guess, Konstantin Popov. Just take a screen, please, share your screen, and go on.
Yes, one moment.
Evgenia, maybe you are going to shut down, okay?
Oh, it's done, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see my slides?
Yes. If you can have a big screen.
Yeah. Okay. It's visible?
Yes.
Well, good morning. Good morning, dear colleagues. One more time, my name is Konstantin Popov, and I'm glad to present on this workshop my work committed to the corporate governance as a determinant of ESG practices and corporate financial performance in Russian public companies. My presentation will take about 15 minutes, and after that, I will be glad to answer your questions and comments. As Evgenia has mentioned, the ESG theme has become popular in the last 2 decades, not only among investors, as you can see on the slide, the share of market capitalization covered by some ESG scores, but also it has been popular in academic field, academic sphere, due to increasing ESG factors' role in making financial and strategic decisions, and also due to increasing overall ESG importance in the activities of the company, in its disclosure, and as a result in its corporate governance and decision making. In this table, I tried to present the...
Excuse me, Konstantin, we didn't see your slides. We see only the title slide.
Okay, I'll try to...
Maybe you should to share another window.
Now you can see.
We see the title slide, yes.
And the next one?
The title, only the title. We don't see the presentation of full screen.
One moment.
At first, you should start the presentation and then to share exactly the presentation window.
Can you see the slide with the relevance?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so on this slide, I tried to illustrate that share of market capitalization covered by different ESG scores in the world by now is above 70%, while in the US and European Union it exceeds 85 or even 90%. And this causes increasing interest in academic sphere. Well, here I try to demonstrate the most relevant works deducted to ESG as a determinant of corporate financial performance, which have been written in the previous 5 years, and all of them agree that ESG has become one of the key factors of corporate performance, and S factor or social responsibility of company is the most influential one. And according to the authors of empirical studies, this is caused by various factors such as stakeholders' higher support that enhances market evaluation of companies, also due to mitigation of different risks of companies through corporate environmental and social performance, and as a result lower cost of capital and a higher market value. Then let's turn to the issue of corporate governance and its impact on ESG. Here, most researchers split the theme on sales characteristics and broader executive characteristics and on board characteristics. They agree that ESG is a disciplining factor for top management and can mitigate some financial distresses, but some researchers take our attention to the fact that in poorly governed companies, ESG investments can increase agency risk through the case when managers improve their own reputation at the expense of company. Speaking about SEO, researchers suppose that high SEO power indicated by participation in board of directors, significant share in ownership, and high remuneration decreases corporate ESG performance, while SEO tenure and SEO education level enhances ESG practices. moreover, according to various studies, board of directors can be like a mitigating power in the case of ESG and corporate performance in case of poor management, because board independence, diversified expertise, and attitude to ESG can improve corporate ESG and its influence on corporate financial performance, even in case of relatively high SEO power and some negative SEO characteristics. Basing on the literature review, I have formulated the hypothesis presented on the screen. According to my hypothesis, SEO age and tenure, as well as SEO education level, enhance corporate ESG scores, while SEO education in finance and management also positively affects corporate ESG scores. Moreover, diversified SEO experience, which will include experience in civil service or state service, and experience on SEO position in previous company, also assumed to lead to higher corporate ESG score. At the same time, SEO membership in board of directors or SEO duality as an indicator of SEO power is negatively associated with ESG. Speaking about board characteristics, I have hypothesis that board size, as well as its independence and existence of directors, expatriates and directors with financial expertise, leads to better, leads to higher ESG score, as well as existence of specialized strategy committee and ESG committee in the board, which demonstrates board's commitment to ESG problem. And my final hypothesis is that ESG scores, their improvement make positive impact on corporate financial performance. The scheme of my model is presented on the screen. As an indicator of financial performance, I have chosen three indicators: return on assets, market capitalization, and Tobin skew. As an ESG score, I have chosen S&P Market Intelligence ESG rating, which consists of environmental, social, and governance and economics score separately in different weights. And SEO characteristics and board characteristics are presented on the slide, and they are connected with my hypothesis. And as a control variables, I tried to control by my companies by their size through revenue and assets, through EBITDA margin, debt level as debt to assets, and net capex normalized by sales volume. Here you can see the description, the brief description of my sample, which consists of 82 largest Russian non-financial public companies from index of Moscow Exchange, 7 years from 2013 to 2019, and it's important to notice that ESG score covers about 28% of observations, but at the same time it covers over 53% of market capitalization, because most of companies in the sample from oil and gas sector and metallurgy sector actually have some ESG score from S&P Market Intelligence. Let's turn to the comparative analysis of SEO and board characteristics in companies with ESG score and without ESG score. As you can see, companies with ESG score are characterized by higher average SEO age and tenure, while CEO experience in on the CEO position in previous companies is higher for companies without ESG. Also, it's interesting to note that in companies with ESG, CEO almost 50% of CEO have economic and financial education, and about 40% have an experience of civil or state services, which is significantly higher than in companies without ESG. Speaking about boards characteristics, we can see that board size and number of independent directors and number of expatriates in a board is at average it is higher for companies with ESG. And also if we look on the final graph, companies with ESG have 75% of companies with ESG have specified strategy committee, and more than 20% have specified ESG committee, which is higher than companies without ESG. Here I tested my hypothesis about CEO and board characteristics and their impact on ESG score of companies. Here we can see that overall ESG score depends on CEO civil service experience, and it makes significant positive impact, while which was interesting for result for me, CEO previous experience in corporations on the CEO positions, which measured by years of this experience, was negative, had a negative coefficient, and this is true for all for ESG score at all, and for social score and environmental scores separately. And also for environmental score, we have a positive impact of CEO tenure and negative impact of CEO educational level, which is also unexpected result. Also, it's interesting to mention that ESG committee was positive factor for environmental score and negative for social score, which can somehow be explained by the focus of Russian companies on environmental issues. And speaking about board size and number of independent directors and number of directors expatriates, we can notice that independence of board and share of foreign directors have been a positive factor for ESG scores of Russian companies. Here I tested impact of ESG score and social and environmental scores separately on market capitalization and Tobin's Q. I need to notice that return on assets as one more depending variable. For return on assets, there was no significant impact of ESG identified. So here we can see only market capitalization, and here the impact is significant and relatively strong, and weaker impact on Tobin's Q. And finally, I tried to include in the model ESG scores, CEO characteristics, board characteristics, and control variables, adding return on assets as a control variable for better explaining force of the model. Here we can see that ESG score as well as environmental and social scores are positive factors for corporate financial performance indicators, as well as CEO tenure. But which was interesting that for some cases, economic and financial education of CEO were negative factors. But here, again, we have a number of independent directors and directors expatriates as a positive factor for corporate financial performance. I would like to finish my presentation with key results of the analysis which has been conducted by now, that CEO tenure and CEO civil experience are positively associated with ESG score, while previous experience on CEO position were negatively associated. So the hypothesis 1 is only partly confirmed. Also, board independence and number of directors expatriates is significantly positively associated with ESG, but specialized ESG committee has a contradictory impact. So hypothesis 2 is also confirmed only partly. And hypothesis 3 about significant positive impact of ESG on corporate financial performance is mostly confirmed. And for further development of this model, I would like, first of all, to broaden my sample. Then I would like to include such indicator of CEO power as CEO's ownership in the company. And also I would like to improve technically my model using some techniques which would allow us to understand the interaction of corporate governance characteristics and ESG score in their impact of on financial performance of Russian companies. Thank you for your attention. Now I'm ready to answer a question.
Thank you, Konstantin. Don't shut down, please, your presentation.
Okay.
Because it can help you maybe somehow for our questions. Do we have questions from the audience?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions or suggestions. First of all, I've liked very much your paper, Konstantin. I think that's an interesting approach. And just 2 or 3 minor questions that perhaps you could take into account. For instance, when you introduce the independence of the board and so on, do you work with the number of independent directors or with the proportion of independent directors?
One moment. Yes, in this case, in this model, I was working with the number of independent directors, but in fact, I had an idea to test the proportion, and I suppose that I will, in my further development, because I will definitely develop this model and this work at all for further publications, I will try to test the proportion because, in fact, it can. I had some doubts with maybe interpretation. I suppose that, but in the beginning, the interpretation of number of independent directors will be a bit more clear than interpretation of their proportion in board in the total board structure. That's why for the first model, I have chosen the number, but I agree that the proportion is also can make sense.
Okay, so I have seen that there are other people who are wanting to ask our questions. So I'll stop here, and in case we have some time later, I will ask some other questions. But
yeah,
thank you.
Bye.
Evgenia, do you have a question?
First of all, thank you for the presentation and for the analysis. It is really valuable that you take a lot of indicators of ESG and sustainable governance, and you try to find the correlation. It is very interesting to see the statistics. And I have a little question about financial indicators. Maybe I just skip this moment. how and why did you choose these particular indicators?
Well, thank you for your question. First, I tried to choose indicators which would reflect both accounting and market performance of a company. For accounting, I have chosen ROA, return on assets, due to my previous. I had previous work on somehow related theme, and there I used return on assets, and there I have detected some significant coefficients. So I have chosen ROA because of my experience, and then I have chosen market capitalization and Tobin skew as a more relatively simple market market value indicators. And I suppose that maybe it makes sense to choose also some economic value added indicator in order to develop my work. But I will do it further.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see that Ion also wants to ask a question. Go ahead, please, Ion.
Yes, Konstantin, one question. So you mentioned about your intention to broaden your research. Can you be more specific about the maybe characteristics and the methods you want to put in it further?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, as I've mentioned, I suppose that it would be interesting to include the indicator of CEO's participation in ownership of company. The deal is that, for example, in Russia, most some CEOs they own a very little share of ownership, and at the same time they own some shares through affiliated companies. It will be interesting to test the hypothesis about CEO power and ESG in Russian companies through their CEO's share ownership. And also, I would like to technically improve the model, because here it is, so I would say, relatively simple, and in my opinion, it doesn't reflect the interaction of governance characteristics and ESG and the impact on financial performance at the full scale. I suppose that it needs to be more difficult to reflect some more difficult interactions. So I suppose that the main ones are these two that I have mentioned.
Okay, thank you. And Alexandra, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. And I would like to ask you a question. Did you use ESG score from one rating agencies? And don't you think that different rating agencies have different methodologies to estimate the companies? So maybe it will be good for a future paper to investigate different ratings from different rating agencies.
Yes, thank you. I agree with this comment. And by the way, so many articles that deal with this issue, they mention that the main problem among ESG ratings is that the lack of how to say unifications or standardization of the approaches. So here I was using ESG score from Market Intelligence, S&P Market Intelligence, because it covers a great deal of indicators when they count their ratings, environmental, social, and so on. They use a significant number of indicators, specific indicators, and I suppose that it is like a high qualified rating. But in order to diversify and to and due to difference in approaches of different rating agencies, I suppose that yes, it will be useful to test various ratings. Thank you.
Okay, and now our discussants, please. Just continue if you have some comments additionally, please.
Okay, I have also a question about hypothesis 3. You are analyzing the financial performance, but one of your measures is market capitalization. So I'm afraid that your results can be driven by the size of the company. Do you understand my point? Because when you use the Tobin skew, it's fine. It's a ratio, so the market versus book value, no problem. But when you use the log of market capitalization, basically what you are measuring is the size of the company.
Yes, I tried to how to say to use it in my model. For example, in the somehow simplified model, there is a size of company presented like by logarithm of revenue, but further in further models where I added characteristics of board and CEO, I faced that with the problem that the problem of multicollinearity in case of adding revenue, and that's why I had to drop it from the model or from the final model.
And also, I have another suggestion is that perhaps you could provide a t-test of means comparison between the companies with an ESG score and companies without. Yes, here in this, perhaps you could run a t-test of mean comparison in order to know if these differences are statistically significant or not.
No, here I didn't conduct this t-test, but here I just compare them like in descriptive statistics way, but I suppose that it would be useful.
Okay. Good.
Anastasia, maybe you also had some.
I have a couple of questions actually to Konstantin. Thank you very much for your presentation. That's really interesting, and it contains much more information and demonstrates the progress. Yeah, even comparing to the paper you've sent. Yeah, yeah. So the first question is about the tenure. Yeah. So your results demonstrate that the tenure is really significant and the coefficient is quite high at the CEO tenure. What's behind that? What's your intuition about the tenure? Why the tenure is so significant for the ESG overall score and participation?
Well, thank you for a question. I suppose that it can be somehow explained by the results or by previous results of on other samples. The deal is that ESG is considered as integration of ESG in decision making. By now has been considered as a indicator of executives and boards' attitude to long-term development of company, its long-term sustainability, and that's why CEO tenure can make positive impact on ESG due to being like an indicator of CEO's attitude to this concrete company, his or her interest in long-term development, in long-term results of this company, and as a result, attitude to ESG.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have just one comment. So actually, I had two, but the first one was already mentioned by Professor, yeah, about the t-tests. I would also start from the t-tests. And the second one is about the potential indigeneity. Yes, so I believe that there are plenty of potential relationships into two different directions. Yeah. So when you have so much information, when you have a large database, that's a perfect starting point. Yeah. But then it's extremely important to be very cautious, very accurate with the indigeneity. Yeah, especially when we are talking about, so what is the first one, ESG company or CEO? Yes, CEO or company. So is that the company that is looking for such a CEO, or CEO influences the company? Yes, so please be accurate about that, and I do recommend you to use different econometric techniques with the indigeneity, working with the indigeneity issues.
So, thank you. I agree with this comment. I fully agree with this comment.
Okay, nice. I also have a question, but I don't need your particular answer just immediately. I'm a little bit concerned that in all your models, your constant is really highly significant. What does it mean? Think a lot. Despite you have a lot of variables, maybe something is still missing. So think a lot.
Yes, thank you.
So we need to go and even to hurry up, because we are just behind our time due to the program. And I would like to invite Ion to present his paper on the literature review, please.
You hear me? So the content of the presentation is basically focused on the methodological aspects of the literature review regarding the performance of green bond in emerging capital markets. Sorry, my name is Ion, a student from Romania. Some key facts and figures. At the international level, Kyoto Protocol actually was a starting point in raising the concern about the environmental protection and climate change. Then Paris Environmental Agreement was basically a continuing initiative launched by Kyoto Protocol in 2015, which actually emphasized more and more the importance of this topic, of this concern for the future humanity and the future development. Some other organizations focused its attention fully to the climate change and environmental protection, sustainable development, which is especially International Energy Agency and also UN, United Nations. Some interesting facts and some interesting figures actually for me is that for 2021, it is expected that the gap between green investments and let's say fossil fuel investments it will narrow. And also interesting things is about how we convert the effort of green finance into the real results, which means reduction in tons of CO2, or for example, producing capacities of renewable energies gigawatts. Why emerging markets? First of all, it is about the fact that emerging markets are behind the process of providing actually conditions for issuing green bonds and also green financing. Green markets actually capital markets, emerging capital markets somehow are engaged in this in the Paris Agreement protocol. and they should reach the targets by 2030, if I'm not mistaken. Also, globalization process is putting a pressure on these countries in order to be competitiveness for the medium and long run. And also these countries, emerging countries, depends more and more on foreign direct investments. So basically, considering the fact that this presentation will be a more methodological one, I will try to focus attention on the machine-based content analysis of the literature review. So I'll start with the definition of green finance provided by some international organization, and we can see that the common keywords in these definitions. It's about, of course, environment. It's about investment. So we talk about CapEx, not OpEx. So financial resources are somehow concentrated on the sustainable business development and also sustainable public development, generically speaking, about accountability, and of course about environment and climate protection and also social care. Some ideas about why we buy and why we issue green bonds. So for the investors, it is important to have green bonds from the perspective of reputation and climate care, environment protection, also for profit. It's a very good instrument it seems to be a very good instrument for risk management and hedging strategies for those who wants to invest in this in green bonds. In some tax jurisdictions are providing tax incentive for having such kind of instruments. It is very important also for those who are ESG oriented that holding such kind of investments is keeping their let's say mandate for investing in social responsible projects. It seems that, as you can see, Philip Brown is stating that nowadays ESG instruments, actually green finance, is as important as the digital investment areas. For the issuers, of course, it's access to let's say the new stream of financing. Also to new class of investors. Issuing green bonds will, of course, will bring reputation. Also in the context of climate care for climate and environmental protection. We should not forget about ESG adherence, because those who wants to finance, let's say, sustainable development projects or environmental protection projects will enhance their ESG rating. And for the medium and long term, green bonds will bring, of course, additional value to the company, to the company and to the business. Yeah. So from the methodological point of view, considering the machine-based content analysis, I will run my first stage of my literature review using the following, let's say, steps. First of all, we'll interrogate the databases, Scopus and Web of Science. In the second step, second step will help me to answer the question and to bring the specific, what are the specific emerging capital markets relevant for my area of research. The third step will be to combine the functionalities of WOS-Viewer with the data provided by Scopus. Then, based on the results from WOS-Viewer, we easily can, we can depict the clusters, relevant clusters for the research topic. And then results provided from WOS-Viewer, provided by WOS-Viewer, combined with Excel functionalities, but it can be used any other software, and based on the OLAP principles, OLAP cube principles, we can depict very good results and quick results in terms of literature context, general context, and what is the direction of literature development in the future. So basically, in the first step, very quickly, I extracted two sets of data. So the first set was referring specifically for the green bond criteria, and the second set I was referring to the green finance criteria. Why? Because it gives a broader view about the research in the green finance, and maybe in this cluster I can find some reliable and qualitative information which I cannot find in the green bond cluster, or actually criteria for data retrieved from Scopus and WOSViewer. Basically, in the second phase, I already can get the preliminary answer to the specific market, which will be under the scope of the further research. So combining data from climate bond initiative in terms of value of bond issue, green bond issuance between 2014 and 2020, and the data from Web of Science in terms of published papers, we can conclude that countries relevant for today research will be, as you can see on the slide, so China, South Africa, Russia, India, Brazil, which actually started to issue such kind of green instruments. Also, from this preliminary analysis, we can conclude easily that the emerging capital markets can be split in two categories. So on one side we have China, with far, I mean, in terms of value of bond issues and also contribution to the academic literature, and the other countries, which are at the beginning of the process, it seems. Here it's a visual, just a visual picture of the two sets of data. On the left we see only green bonds criteria from Scopus, and on the right we have green finance. Why we need to extract a broad database for green finance? Because from these keywords and the, let's say, keywords clusters, we can find evidence about the performance of regulatory systems over the green bonds. So we have, so I identified three approaches how to categorize keywords from the WOSViewer. One approach can be just random selection of the keywords provided by WOSViewer, not considering actually the structure of the cluster provided by them. The second approach is just entire, which can consider the entire keywords based on the occurrence as a scaling it. Or the third approach can be just to take the clusters provided by WOSViewer and we can just replicate into the Excel OLAP functionalities. In my case, I just took point A. I went through all the relevant keywords provided by WOSViewer, and I made three categories. Here we have two. Keywords relevant for the financial factors affecting the performance of green bonds, and keywords relevant for non-financial factors affecting the performance of green bonds. It is also important to have the total ink strength into consideration, and also the occurrence, because of it will help us for further analysis into OLAP Cube. Some preliminary results about the impact of for the topic cluster of the impact of the financial, let's say, generically speaking, financial factors over the performance of green bonds. So first of all, we can see from the analysis provided by machine-based content analysis that the journals actually publishing papers with this topic actually are not from the top, let's say, economical or finance. These are mixed profile journals, as you can see in the slide. We can use easily the OLAP cube principles for data analysis to quickly just get the preliminary results about the tendency and the areas of research. But we should also combine with the traditional literature review, or let's say traditional or classical literature review approaches. Also, as you can see on the second graph, this topic of research is quite new, so we can see relevant contributions to the starting from the 2017, and today is growing fast. Here, again about the performance, the impact of the performance, financial performance factors over the green bonds. Literature papers can easily evidence this from the retrieve from the OLAP cube. First idea is that emerging markets are not researched quite well. We don't see relevant evidence from this perspective. Second, we cannot find it's a research gap. Another research gap is that we cannot find the relevant and the specific factors over the performance of green bonds. We just can see the clusters of or group of factors, financial factors which can influence the performance of green bonds. I didn't mention before, so when I say financial factors, I'm referring to the factors coming from capital markets and financial markets of each country. Non-financial factors means that factors that are not related to the financial system of a country, but more are related to the macroeconomic factors or taxation or regulatory factors. So from non-financial, the same conclusions, we can see that not let's say financial or economical top journals are prevailing in the research. We have also journals with sustainability and climate change focus. Here, for me, it was quite difficult to clearly identify the non-financial factors affecting the performance of green bonds. Therefore, I concluded that a mixed approach or balanced approach should be in the literature review should be considered. So on one side, machine based content analysis together with traditional approach to literature review. Another approach is, or actually, when I go from the machine analysis approach to traditional approach, one by one analysis to each journal will be necessary. Here I found some let's say using this one by one analysis of the articles, I found some let's say relevant non-financial factors, which be macroeconomic aspects. Surprisingly, it's COVID. Of course, certification, corporate social responsibility. Also, some researchers combine geopolitical risk and oil price in the same let's say research context. When I did this data extraction from the let's say from the OLAP principal cube, I identified also some articles. The system brings some articles which are not related to these non-financial performance factors. but this let's say judgmental academical professional judgmental activity we should undertake in order just to refine the list. So I draw some conclusions why academic context is not so well, let's say, developed in this area. I mean, the impact of non-performance factors over the performance of green bond, non-financial factors. This is because maybe it's a very new area, as you can see the years of publication. Also, the dynamics of data to combine between, I don't know, the yield of this type of bonds with GDP information, inflation, or so the dynamics of data sets are different. Also, regulatory cluster in regulatory cluster can be as well, let's say, analyzed from our approach to literature review. We just selected the keywords provided by I selected just keywords provided by Vosphere in terms of regulatory. Combined with data from Web of Science and Scopus. I also did some Visual Basic programming just to easily and more relevant to combine these two sets of data. And I identified preliminary some areas where the research has an impact. So about climate policy, corporate social responsibility, government level regulation, and also energy efficiency regulations. And certification is also in this category. Comparing, I found certification of green bonds in this category, in the category of regulatory cluster, and also in the category of non-financial performance factors. Here as well, traditional approach should somehow complement the analytics, because maybe because of the fact that this topic, I mean, the influence of the regulatory system of the performance of green bonds is more or less soft. From this, let's say, machine-based content analysis, we can depict easily some other relevant information. For example, just another approach to the countries, regions, provided by countries, regions which actually are regulated, actually are researched in the academic literature context. So we see the general, the general picture. Some author, Banga and Hanif, is bringing some general view about green bonds and in the context of renewable energy for the developing countries. China is prevailing. So in the as we can see also from the occurrence and the link strength information from the table. United States and Europe also plays an important role in the academic literature review, but not relevant for our topic of research. Also, using this methodological analysis, we can depict some preliminary methodologies used in the research. So classical regression models. Also integrated assessment model used for green bond analysis. I found the paper of Gloshrod, where he is using a CGE model in order to understand a CGE model in the context of green finance in order to understand the future development of the economies in the EU. here also using the machine learning data analysis, we can identify the trends in the future trends. Some preliminary ideas about the future trends in the green bonds / green finance direction. Interesting is the fact that the keywords, more or less, based on the keywords judgment. So investment, carbon emission, China, sustainable development, innovation, and climate change are prevailing. And the part of these keywords actually we can identify in the definition we saw earlier, which concludes the idea that we will not see in the near future the big shift in the direction of the academic research. An interesting idea is the fact that we couldn't see a big correlation or the existence of the strong relationship between ECG and the green bonds / green finance in the literature. So we saw just a couple papers based on the machine techniques analysis. In conclusions, these methods should be complementary to the literature review, to the traditional method. Also, it is useful and easy accessible and easy understandable OLAP principles in building some models to analyze the data. Also, OLAP principles can provide more data than much more than we saw here in terms of authors, I don't know, years, publishers, other journals, and so on. So also, I was thinking here to combine citations of keywords, but this is going to be in the later stage, in order to generate an index more relevant to bring on the top the most relevant papers. It seems that for financial factors which influence the performance of green bonds, machine-based analysis is providing more relevant data and then non-financial factors and the regulatory factors. Because financial factors and the research papers on financial factors are considering more, let's say, has access to more information and to, let's say, easy information from the market.
Thank you.
Sorry for being a little bit.
Okay. That Alexander Kamenskih is already the question.
Okay, Ion, thank you for a very interesting speech. I have some comments to you. Firstly, I think not a lot of green, but a lot of IT components, which may be too interesting. I think it may be positive if you compare this part and give some paper, maybe in corporate finance, and connect it with method of research to connect with ESG, green bonds, and so on, these themes, but with more point connected with IT methods. And I have a question. OLAP methods, what soft you use for this?
So thank you very much. Indeed, we can use, so all our principles can be used with different, I don't know, softwares, but just for more accessibility, I use it in Excel. So just I compiled data from Voxviewer and Excel functionality, specifically pivot tables with some Visual Basic programming. So I mean, it's nothing complicated. Nothing complicated. Excel can be used very easy.
You have some IT results or IT instruments you use for this. What the IT instruments you use to have a lab decision, or in your paper only principle of a lab?
No. IT instrument, as I said, Excel, Microsoft Office.
You write some program on Excel, yes?
Just we use pivot table, for example, combined with some Visual Basic programming. Okay,
it's maybe discussed later. Okay, but main idea, what I want to say, it's very interesting literature review, and if you stress it on software instrument and IT approaches, it may be interesting also. It may be published not only in corporate finance, but business informatics, for example, maybe. Or ITQM conference next year, when you have practical results.
Actually, this method is not so not complicated. It's very easy with easy access to to medium profile IT, medium skills IT people. So there are much more advanced methods of content analysis of the papers.
Okay, thank you. I think it's interesting.
Thank you very much for questions and comments. And now I'm giving the floor for the formal discussions, please.
I have to acknowledge that I'm not an specialist in this topic, but I think that you have done a huge effort to deal with so much information and so on. I have a small question about what are your results would be the same. You are focused on the emerging markets. What would happen, or what do you expect to have if you had focused on more developed markets? Would you have got the same results? What do you think, Ian?
I think results. So developed markets. So as you could see in the fourth or fifth slide. So their academic contribution to this topic is much higher. Therefore, having more data for processing with the help of the IT tools can bring much more relevant information. So the results, the results for developed countries could be a bit different. For example, if I was focusing only on US, which is the second green bond issuers according to CBI, so the results provided by IT tools were of course different because we have much more data, academic data.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I suppose it's not a comment, it's a question. Hi, my name is Andrei Fedorov. I'm from Forestal Federal University. And thank you very much for your topic. And my question is concerning financial aspects of green bonds. You told that green bonds have a positive effect on investors and companies. Could you please compare bonds and green bonds from the point of risk and yield to maturity rate? For example, one company issue bond and green bond, where is the risk will be higher? Whereas the interest rate will be higher or lower from the point of investors and company.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, if we take, for example, a brown bond and the green bond, so having the same, exactly the same profile, due to the today's context, with regard to the I mean ECG, climate change, sustainable development, and so on and so forth, demand for green bonds will be higher. So demand for being higher, demand for the green bonds, it means also the let's say this greenium or the premium for demand for the green bonds will be higher. Therefore, some papers reflect a positive delta yield for such kind of bonds. On the other side, considering the risk profile, for example, if I issue green bonds, this means I'm less exposed to climate I don't know, risk, which might take place in the future. Also, I don't know, also social bonds, if I but it's not somehow connected to this. Also, this means I care by social characteristics of the one or another country.
As I understand, the green bond is a separate segment of bonds from the point of risk and maturity, delta maturity rate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Maybe if Anastasia also has something to add, please.
Yeah, I have a very short comment. Thank you, Jon, for the presentation. That's really a very interesting review of different trends in the literature on the green bonds. And I believe that will be the perfect starting point for you for the first chapter of your dissertation. Yeah. I have just one comment. So you made a very interesting conclusion that the papers on green bonds are mostly published in maybe not in financial journal, yeah, but mostly in the journals with a focus on the sustainability. I think that this conclusion depends strongly on the on your own view, on your own approach to analysis. What I'm talking about, look, if you take a look on the green bonds from the point of view of asset management, for example, then you will apply the other keywords for your analysis. Yeah, and then potentially you can also explore one more part of the literature concerning not only the green bonds versus the regulation things, yeah, regulatory things, but also the green bonds from the point of view of the asset managers, of the portfolio management, and so on. So, who prefers to invest money into the green bonds and things like that. The same you can do if you take a point of view of pure corporate finance. Yeah. So imagine the situation when you're a CFO and you should make the decision, the financing decision, the decision on the fundraising, whether it's worth to think over issuing the green bonds, or it's better, even if you can issue the green bonds, to issue the brown bonds. Yeah. So of course that's quite an important and quite a complicated decisions, and many factors influence that. Yeah. And I believe that your very interesting and I would say really wide review can be even better, yeah, if you add a bit from the other dimensions. Yeah, I would start from the asset management.
Indeed, I was thinking about this actually, about this aspect when I draw the, let's say, when I interrogated data. So it depends how you select keywords in the cube. So if you select into this direction, indeed, top, I don't know, Journal of Corporate Finance or other top finance journal will come up. but I try to put almost the whole relevant keywords from the VOS viewer just to see what is the general view about the whole financial performance factors on the green bonds. So indeed, if we restrain the area of research, we will have another picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe it's not about restraining the area, it's about aiding and focusing and giving additional segments.
Yes,
Just slicing the area. It's just still broad, and then we are focused on some other segments, and that's really very nice comment. Thank you everybody for the comments, the questions for my PhD student. Thank you very much. And we need also to discuss the Alexandra Yegorova presentation. We are just out of time, but we need to finish the session. And Alexandra, please go ahead. Then we will discuss how we should adjust the time schedule today.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I will be brief, but tell you the key results of my research. The purpose of my research is to analyze the role of governance component and key corporate governance factors that contribute ESG rating. And here you can see the results from my first part of the research. I selected 4 sectors that will be analyzed and the markets that I would like to analyze. So I made the literature review and review of the market and find out that 4 sectors should be analyzed exactly. First sector is the information technology sector, then communication service sector, industrials, and consumer discretionary. And also I find out that the main market should be analyzed by me. It is developed markets. And the next slide, I will tell you in more details why I would like to analyze these sectors and these markets. What is done now? I analyze the significance and application of ESG rating for companies, why it is so important and why it is a trend nowadays. Also, I studied the role of different ESG components. Exactly, it is ecological components, social and governance, and understand the importance of G factor exactly, and also analyze the methodologies of different rating agencies that assess G factor as G score in ESG rating. Also, I overviewed ESG ratings for chosen sectors. And at first, I analyzed ESG ratings for whole sectors, and then I chose 4 for my future research. And I made this for countries. I also analyzed ESG ratings for all countries and chose exact market to analyze in future. What else? The next result, it is the hypothesis that I developed during and according to the results of previous research, and developed a model. At first, I told that I analyzed the relevance of ESG topic. Here you can see the diagram from Google Score about papers that have ESG component in their title and in their texts. As you see, the main part, it was in 2018. A lot of papers were in this year. Now the trend of ESG papers falling down, but if we compare it to ESG rating components that also is depicted in articles, we see that ESG rating as a topic of interest is rising until 2019. So the ESG is up-to-date topic, and we can find and research some new areas of it. What about the relevance of ESG rating? Why I use ESG rating as the main component and variable of my research? Because I studied that it had influence on investment activities. Morgan Stanley Institute made a research that they found out that equity funds outperform non-ESG peers by 4%, and also another studies also find that sustainable funds outperform their peers, and sustainable investing is now the main trend. Companies that have high ESG rating attract investments far more than their peers and the other companies without ESG rating or with low ESG rating. Also, ESG rating has an impact on market value. There are a lot of literature that have contribution to it, and that find out the positive correlation between companies' market value and ESG rating. For example, the study of Bank of America find out that developed market US and Western European companies have positive correlation of capital to earnings ratio and ESG rating. And the third relevance, it is the financial performance of the companies. Also, as we see in previous works and in literature review, the financial performance had a positive correlation with ESG ratings, but the main problem is that there are a lack of analysis by sectors. So practically the most of the papers investigate the correlation between ESG rating and financial performance market value by using the data from all sectors and don't have exactly investigation in each sector. So I decided to make this research. And also the next step, I analyzed the E, S, or G component. What is the most significant component of ESG rating that influence market value, investment activity, and financial performance? And analyzing the literature, most of the studies and most of the investment management companies say that the G component, corporate governance, is one of the most significant components that introduce ESG rating and then affect market value and financial performance. Why? Because corporate governments, as we see before, have the first step influence. So if company have good corporate governance, efficient board of directors, it is they have a more probability to have initiatives in ecological problems, in social problems of the company. So it is like the first step in rising ESG rating. The next step was to analyze the governance metrics that are assessed by different rating agencies. There are more than 100 agencies that have ESG ratings, and in the slide you will see three main. MSCI is one of the biggest rating agencies that have ESG ratings. They pay attention to board of directors, to the payment, to the ownership structure and control, and also to the accounting and financial statement property reflects the state of business, and also to the tax accounting. S&P Global also have their ESG rating, and they rate G component by overview the structure, the code of values, transparency, reporting, and also they add cyber risk assessment and systems and risk management at all. And this is the main difference from other rating agencies. Sustainalytics, the Morningstar company, also has the G factor. It is honesty and quality of management, composition of the board of directors, rights of shareholders, financial reporting as it was in MSCI, and interaction with stakeholders. So different rating agencies have their own methodology on assessment G component. And the next part of my research contained the comparison of ESG rating by sectors, and as a result of this, but I chose 4 sectors that have the lowest ESG rating. Why I did so? I chose industrials, information technology companies, consumer discretionary, and communication services. I chose these sectors because they have the lowest rating, and maybe if there is a strong positive correlation between ESG rating and market value, only these industries have most of opportunity. If they rise their ESG rating, they will rise their market value. So if we find out this positive correlation, it will be the motivation for these industries to rise their ESG rating, because now they are not the leaders of rating between the sectors. And by deeply analyzed ESG rating by components, I found that about ecological component of these industries can be similar to the leaders of ESG rating, and the governance part, it is colored by blue, is lower and is lower in these sectors. So if corporate governments have really high significance in all ESG ratings, as it was mentioned in literature review. So by rising corporate governments, or these companies can rise their ESG rating, that will let them to rise their market value. And it was the main logic for my hypothesis. Analyzing these sectors, I found out the main government risks that now have these sectors that will not allow them to raise their ESG rating. For information technologies companies, there is some problems with board of directors, with antitrust disputes. That is very common problem for them in IP focus segments. They have very unindependent board of directors, and this will let them to not to have high G score. Communication service, one of the main problems for them is that these companies are usually depend on governance, so it may be the strong correlation with government's position, with rule of law, with corruption. And industrial sector, most of rating agencies do not associate the sector of capital goods with governance factors, that they are usually neutral to ESG rating because most of the companies have the private structure. But I also would like to analyze companies that have public structure. And the consumer sector, there is also some connections with government agencies, and in some of these companies, the main problem was identified by agencies. It is a corruption. The next part of my research was to analyze what countries I would like to study, and I studied the ESG rating by countries. As you can see, the best ESG countries are from developed markets, so I chose developed markets instead of emerging markets, developing markets, or Russia, because I would like to understand at first the correlation between G factor and the market value and the factors of corporate governments and ESG rating in developed markets that have ESG ratings. Most of the companies have ESG ratings, and find out the results. And in my future works, I will continue the investigation of developing markets and understand the difference between these two markets. Also, I chose developed market for my research because of the developing markets have lack of information about ESG ratings. And as a result of the investigation and literature review, I formulated hypotheses. The first one, it is about how ESG rating is correlated with market value of these companies that I chosen. The first one is there is a positive correlation between ESG rating and company market value in all sectors. The second hypothesis is about what is the most significant ESG component for market value. According to the literature review, I formulated the hypothesis that G factor, corporate governance, has the most significant influence on market value of the companies between all ESG components. And the next three hypotheses about what exactly the factors in governance components that can influence ESG rating. It's about what exactly in corporate governments can raise ESG rating and then market value if they will have positive correlation. The first one, the effective composition of directors have a positive impact on ESG rating. The presence of women in the board of directors increases the company's position in ESG rating, and the diversity of age group within the board of directors. And to analyze these hypotheses, I developed models. First, about positive correlation between ESG and the company market value. It is a model that formulated by Olson. He formulated this model to understand how market value depends on financial indicators and non-financial indicators. Non-financial indicators are not specified in his model, so we can use ESG score as non-financial information. We have Tobin's Q and ROE as financial indicator and ESG score as non-financial. To test the second hypothesis, I use the same model, but as non-financial information, I use not ESG score, but E score, S score, and G score in particular. To test another three hypotheses about the factors of corporate governance and the ESG ratings, the model will use the logistic regression, and we will test as dependent variable, it will be ESG score, and variables, explanatory variables, it will be the data of about the board of directors. And now I'll see the data. To test the first hypothesis about the effective composition of board of directors. It is indicators from Bloomberg terminal about the policy board independence, non-executive board members, independence, CEO information, and the sustainability committee. And here are the signs that I predict to have how these indicators influence ESG rating. For the next hypothesis, it is the presence of women in the board of directors. The indicators also from Bloomberg about diversity, gender diversity, the percentage of women, female CEO, and I think they will have the positive influence on ESG rating. And the last hypothesis, it is the diversity of age groups. The indicators about the age of youngest director, I think that will have the positive correlation with ESG rating because the sustainable development is up-to-date trend, and the age of oldest directors cannot have this effect. And also the board of directors age range have as a conclusion positive influence of ESG and board average age. So I will use these industries. The data will contain 10 years, and I will find out the data find data from Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, Econ terminals. So it was the part that I made, and the next step will to find and collect all the data. Now I am in the process of collecting data, and if I collect all the need data from all rating agencies, I will test their formulated research hypothesis. That's all for now. Thank you, and I'm ready to hear the questions.
Alexandra, thank you very much. May I start with some questions? If you show us the previous slide with the potential variables, especially the group of diversity by ages, I mean, maybe it's not that fun, but it's not that slide, but okay, here. Can you please explain why do you need so many different indicators for the diversity of ages in the boards?
Please, can you repeat the question? I have some problems. Maybe.
What do you need? I'm sorry. Why do you need the age of the youngest, age of the oldest, board, average age? So why don't you use only one measure for diversity of the ages, but you want to apply several of them?
I want to analyze what exactly from these indicators has influence, and I also think that it will be multiculinary problems if I use all of these indicators. And when I collect data, I will choose maybe one or two. I would like to choose age of youngest director and the oldest director to analyze exactly the younger and the older age, not only the diversion of age.
Okay.
Okay. May I follow with this question from Irina? Yes, concerning the diversity of age. So, for instance, you are analyzing the average age. This is different from the diversity. So, what do you expect? Do you expect older boards to be more related to ESG policies or younger boards? So I think that you are, in this point, you are mixing two issues. One is the average age, and the other is the dispersion in the ages of the directors.
So yes, I would like to analyze the diversity, and I think that if the board of directors have far more younger people in it, it will lead them to follow sustainability development politics better than if they have older men in the board of directors.
Okay, so I understand your point. So perhaps consistently with what Irina has suggested, perhaps you could introduce just one metric. For instance, the indicator of this diversity, the variance or the standard deviation of the ages, could be a good metric for all these issues you have in your mind.
Thank you. Yeah, so it will be better to use diversity.
Yeah. And the same for the second group about gender diversity. You also have a similar approach. You have too many different metrics. And especially for, I don't know, you told you are going not to use the Russian data. Am I right? It's
yes.
not Russia. It's
only
not okay. Because if for Russia, you will not have any diversity here. Almost. Okay. Konstantin also wants to ask some questions, please.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I have not really a question, but maybe a comment and proposition. Maybe it will make sense to test if we test the diversity, we can try to test the diversity in expertise, because while preparing for my presentation, I have read some articles where there was one of the indicators was how to say, the difference in expertise of directors, because ESG is quite interdisciplinary, let's say, issue for companies, and some authors suppose that diversified experience of directors can, or executives can enhance ESG. So it's my comment.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have another comments, questions?
I have rather a question. May I? Yeah.
Yes.
Alexandra, thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, that's really interesting to combine so many indicators of governance. So I have two questions actually. The first one is about your potential contribution. Yeah, so what would you like to add to the knowledge about the ESG and the effect of ESG effect on the company? And the second one is about the so how do you distinguish between the ESG quality rankings and ratings and ESG disclosure ratings and rankings, since that's a really different things, yeah? And I have no idea. So what are you applying here? Yeah, but anyway, so that's just an advice, yeah, to be really accurate about that, not to mix up them.
Thank you for your question. About the first one, I think the main purpose of my work, it will be to analyze sectors, in particular these 4 sectors that I showed, and to understand if ESG component or if ESG rating have correlation with market value for these sectors. It is the first one. Secondly, to analyze the main component of ESG ratings and influence market value. Is it really G factor that is depicted in the literature review that I analyzed? And the third one is to analyze the key factors of corporate governance that can influence this ESG rating. And answering your second question, I also think that ESG ratings are not accurate because the methodologies are different. So as a part of my research, I will compare the results using different ratings from different rating agencies, not to face with this problem.
Okay. It seems to me that Alexandra is going to add to the academic world the general conclusion that ESG is now widespreading over all the industries. And in all the industries, despite its energy or just consumer goods or something minor from the point of view of environmental impact or something like this, but despite the difference in technologies between the industries and the impact over the environment, ESG approach to run the company should be taken like universal for all the businesses, all types of companies, so on and so forth. Am I right, Alexandra?
Yes, also to find out the difference between the sectors, as you said.
Okay, Felix, you raised the hand. You want to add? Okay.
Yes. I have a question or just a suggestion. Since first of all, Alexandra, I have liked very much your paper, and I think that has a lot of potential. So you are working with an international data set. So have you thought of controlling for some country level factors, such as the culture of the country, or even the culture of directors? It's not the same to have a British director in an Italian board or that having a German director and so on. Have you thought of these kind of cultural factors?
Yeah, thank you for question. So I thought about the control variables to test my hypothesis. And how did you say the general director?
You will German director, Spanish director, Italian director. They will treat themselves slightly differently due to the cultural background differences in their cultural, communicational backgrounds. So this is really, it's now rising, this topic in finance and in governance, of course, the cultural factor, national culture, even religious culture can matter.
It will be very interesting. I would like to find this data. So if I will have a lot of data to test this hypothesis, I think this cultural diversity, it can be the fourth hypothesis in this sector, not only the age or gender diversity.
Okay. So thank you so much for the discussions. Thank you so much for all the presenters. We need to close that session. The time already expired, even I guess about 40 minutes ago. So we need now to agree what we are going to do with the lunch break, because all other participants, they really are keen on presenting also today, not at night, but more or less still during the daytime. So what is the proposal? So we now have 1 + 8, so 25 minutes, almost half of an hour past 1. So
maybe 14.
14 minutes, you mean 15, 20 minutes? Or
Yes,
we'll start
14, 2 o'clock.
Yes, start at 2 p.m. If we agree to start at 2 p.m., it's just half an hour to release and to have some rest and to have some lunch and to cook even for the family, for him behind. Okay, so see you all after the break, please. And in the session number 2, we are slightly changing our discussion, so we expect that Svetlana Grigorieva from the School of Finance also join us. If Anastasia can stay, we'll be really very happy. If Felix can join for somehow, we'll be really very happy. But I do understand that it's Saturday, yes, and it's not just.
Thank you for Felix for his
for your patience, for your presentation.
I would be delighted to join you for 1 hour more or less. Yes, I would be here. Great.
Okay, so see you all at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.